nicely structured, and if you have, like, have emotion, that's nice, and if you feel confident when you're saying it, that's nice. But, you know, speech ultimately has to be about something. So if you want to help yourself have a good public speech, then you need to know your stuff. You need to actually prepare. Now, what does it mean exactly? It's not just, you know, I have prepared a speech. What does it mean to know your stuff? Let's say you have a debate about global warming. What would it mean in that context to know your stuff? A debate about global warming, what do you need to know if you're preparing for a debate about it?
About the threat, for example, how big is the threat?
Loudly?
How big is the threat, for example?
How big is what?
The threat, for example. The threat of global warming.
The threat, oh, okay, yeah, I understood trade. Threat, yes. But that's the thing, not just that. What do you need to understand?
You have to know everything about the topic, not only those you have already prepared, because the audience maybe could ask you something out of your already existing speech. So you have to know in order to answer.
Yes, and that's very important to understand, because if you want to prepare yourself for public speech, the preparation itself actually, usually, does not have to take a form of writing it down. In most debating formats, and oftentimes you don't have the ability to read a speech that you've prepared. So what does the preparation mean? Preparation means knowing as much as you can about the topic. Because then nobody can surprise you with anything, and you will always have something to say. So again, I know this is difficult, you know, and boring. You have to actually learn stuff. And I know that hurts, but the thing is that that's something that's fundamental. If you don't want to get into a situation where you get nervous because suddenly you don't really know what to say. So it's sometimes like what you prepare, if you write something down, is just the tip of the iceberg. And the iceberg, the rest of the iceberg should also exist, and it should be your knowledge of the subject matter. So you shouldn't really try to be a public speaker about things that you really don't know much about, because then you're setting up yourself for failure. And, you know, having nice structure and having something prepared and, you know, acting it out won't save you, because still, a speech still has to have some sort of important content. Unless, I don't know, unless you're Donald Trump and really, that's not, the content is not the kind of thing that matters to your vote, your electoral base. So, sure, there are situations in which, you know, if you appeal to people who just are ignorant and don't want to know stuff, then yeah, you don't need to, you know things. But generally, if you want to talk to people who want to learn something from the speech, or want to at least know something themselves and want to challenge you on your knowledge, then the preparation is extremely important. And it's not just, you know, the basic knowledge. If you speak, and that's one of the oftentimes it's a common problem, don't be vague. What does it mean to be vague? Yes?
Like not provide the exact numbers, not provide your sources.
Yes. So you maybe don't exactly say how much of something is, when it's important, you don't provide the source. What else?
Don't be clear.
Yeah, no, well, sure, but that's the basic meaning. But, you know, in specific things like numbers or sources. What do you have to be specific about in a speech, apart from numbers and sources? Because this applies even to like arguments about emotions and values, not just you know, economics, something like that, or science. So what do you have to be specific about? So, did somebody say something in the back? That was to the topic. Okay. Yeah.
Definitions of what we're talking about.
Sure, as we've talked about the definitions of, you know, everything, but the point is, the definitions thing specifically is more of a debate thing, because normally you don't have like, okay, and I'm going to define the terms. That's not how in most public speeches you would start the speech. That's more a debating thing to just train you to think about it, to be specific. But being specific, you also should be specific, for instance, about your position. That's something like people shouldn't be guessing, well, what is your position towards what topic you're talking about. For instance, if you were talking about the existence or non-existence of God, what kind of thing would probably want to, your listeners would probably want to specifically know? Which is?
It's whether you believe or not.
Yes, whether you believe in God or not, if you're talking about the existence or non-existence of God. So maybe it would be good to, at the beginning, explain that, oh, by the way, this is my position on that. So your personal position, because people want to know where you stand. So that, don't be vague about that, because that's, you know, always sort of deceitful if you're not being clear about your position. So it's about the numbers, the sources, your position. Then, of course, you should be very clear when you're talking about not only your specific position, but about, for instance, what is the extent of your expertise or experience in the subject. You shouldn't, you know, make the audience guessing about if you, I don't know, talk about maybe some kind of sport. They shouldn't be guessing about whether you actually do the sport, or how long have you done it, or what was sort of your like ultimate achievement. They would care about that. So you shouldn't start without explaining that. And the single word for all that is context. You need to provide context to people in your speech, because many people think that everything is clear. That's also the definition problem in debate, but it isn't. People don't automatically know things that exist in your head. So they don't know what you know. You have to tell them. So you know your position, you have to tell them. You know the numbers or where the information comes from, you have to tell them. You know what's your relationship to the subject matter in general, what's your experience in the field or something, you know it, but you know you have to tell them because they don't. So you have to tell people everything that they might want to need to know. So you have to sort of try to put yourself in the shoes of the audience and like, okay, if I was an audience member, what wouldn't I know about this that I do that is important to understand what I'm talking about. It is related to having the facts, actually. It's like knowledge, or generally would be related to facts, but there's a real big difference between facts and speculations. So you shouldn't present speculation or opinion as a fact. You should present only facts as facts, and you should have them. Which means also to the extent of maybe having the sources, or at least a very good explanation why it doesn't matter where it comes from. Which sometimes may be applicable, because you know, some things like who cares who came up with an idea first. It's like the least important thing that they may be forcing you to learn at school would be, for instance, the names and dates of I don't know, the first person to call a term in some way. What you really need to know is to, for instance, understand the term. It's less important to know like who was the first person who came up with it, necessarily. So in some contexts, the source may not be important, but sometimes the source is important. When is the source of a fact important? Bless you. Or as one Czech saying says, die monster. So what did you want to say?
I think that when you're stating an opinion, you would like to state the source to more like an expertise.
Sure, but when is that relevant?
For example,
just loudly, really speak loudly.
right. For example, if you're stating the position of someone and that someone is media like CNN, it would be more like people are more likely to believe that position.
And again, you really need to speak louder, because you know what happens when you don't speak at the proper volume? They start losing attention and start making even more noise, so it's even less. It's even more difficult to hear. So really, so loudly that everybody is clear that they're supposed to be listening.
All right. So when you're stating
Still more loudly.
when you're stating an opinion, for example, the position of someone, and that someone is CNN, for example, people are more likely to believe that source because it's famous.
Sure, but then it would be misleading.
Yeah, but if it has proven that it's trustworthy in general, people are still more likely to believe it.
But that's the thing, that's the key thing, if it's trustworthy. Or like, where does it come from? It's important to know where the information comes from when it is a controversial thing that is not necessarily accepted as completely proven by everyone. If your audience considers something controversial, then you really need to make sure that you make it clear where the information comes from. Or, of course, you know, many people intentionally don't do that in that situation because they want to mislead the audience that it is authoritative. But it is, when it is not authoritative, then of course you shouldn't say it in the first place. But you should give the disclaimer that, okay, maybe this is not certainly true. Or make it clear that, okay, this is something what some people believe versus this is a thing that was proven in this way, or to this extent, or with this certainty. Because many kinds of proof are not actually bulletproof. There's also, by John Oliver, last week tonight, there's a segment about social science studies and how poorly they have been conducted. So even if in a debate, for instance, or in a public speech, you Google a study, it's not good enough to just Google a study. Why is it not enough? It's like, okay, I think that this is true, so I will Google for like somebody who in a study says that it is true, and I have a proof because I have a study that says it is true. What's wrong with this approach? What is wrong with this approach? To just look for confirmation study.
You are purposely ignoring the other sides.
Sure, because that's the thing. There could be many other studies, in fact many more studies that show the opposite result. Because science is not completely perfect. It doesn't do results without errors. So there's always a chance that, you know, even if you do everything correctly, the study simply will not work out again. So it won't be, it's called replicated. And in that case, in a debate, people oftentimes do this, and in public speeches, they just find one study that confirms what they believe in beforehand, and they think they have proof. But the problem is that in a public speech, if you want to be convincing, what you need to do, truly convincing, what you need to do is to make it clear always, or at least to be extremely clear. You need to not just say that, okay, there are studies that prove what I'm saying is true, but also there is this amount of other studies that show it isn't, so, you know, based on the proportion, like how likely that is. Or if it's a minority case of the studies and you believe them, then you have to explain why you believe them. You could, for instance, try to explain maybe the other studies that are more numerous have some problem with how they're made. So maybe the studies that are made well, even though they are fewer, are the ones that are showing what's actually the truth. So that's why it's problematic that having the facts is not simple, unfortunately. Having the facts means to know the whole spectrum of evidence or of studies or proofs that have been conducted, or know all of the different opinions on the issue. So it means not just knowing the fact that you want to push, but knowing all of the context of the fact. So it's again, you know, difficult and boring and annoying to do the research sometimes, and Google doesn't always cooperate. But what you need to do is always to have this sort of research done.